Twitch chat is a place where common sense and reasoning goes to die. At least for the most part. There is some unhinged chatters out there, and I swear to God, some of them aren't even like real people. They feel like figments of an imagination from your worst nightmare, or like lobotomy victims all spouting some nonsensical garbage that isn't even related to what's happening in the stream. But now I'd like to introduce you to the final boss of unhinged Twitch chatter. This guy. Danny sent me this today, and I haven't heard anyone talk about this, which is surprising, because this is one of those, like, weirder stories that I feel people would be talking about from Twitch. So this guy made a statement in an unnamed streamer's chat claiming that he was about to go kill some people in a mass shooting, and then he got arrested for it because the chatters warned the FBI, and they actually acted on it. So he said that mass murder was coming soon in the Twitch chat, and then they actually showed up and arrested this man, and he's now about to face some serious repercussions for this. This is also, surprisingly, like the first time I feel the FBI's ever acted on something like this. If I can't remember which mass shooter it was, but one of the mass shooters had made a statement similar to this in a YouTube stream, and the FBI was tipped off about it. And they had already like identified that guy as a person of interest, and they still didn't act on it, and he actually did follow through and kill people. What mass shooter was that? Does anyone remember? Was it Nicholas Cruz? It might have been. But yeah, so I think this is a good thing. I am happy to hear that they took action about that. 100%. With everything that's been going on, this is a fat W. Huge L for this fucking loser, but like a big W for law enforcement. I'm glad they finally bothered to take any level of proactive action here, for sure. Now, when he was apprehended and questioned by authorities, he admitted that the account was his and that the comments were stupid, saying that he was in a dark place, kind of similar to like a YouTuber apology video, honestly. He was saying like he was depressed, intoxicated, and he was recently going through a loss in the family, so he made those comments, which isn't a justification at all for what he said. Like, it's sad to hear that he was going through such tough shit, but that doesn't at all excuse these kind of threats. And I do consider these threats now. This isn't just like nonsensical hoopla tossed out there. I no longer view it as it's just a prank, bro. It's just me goofing around being a little silly, threatening some mass murder. When there have been so many mass shootings, and like I mentioned in the stream, one case just like this where someone made a very similar threat and then followed through on it shortly thereafter. And you see so many times, like almost every time there's a mass shooter, the authorities come out and they're like, yeah, we actually knew that this guy was a threat. We also knew about the things he was saying online. We actually even had him in our custody for a little while. We gave him a fist bump and told him, like, you know, it's all good now. We looked into your eyes, into the windows of your soul, and we decided you probably won't do it. And then he did it. So we were kind of shocked and almost betrayed that he did it. But yeah, we knew like all of these details. And then you always like are left scratching your head like, well, why didn't you act on it? Like maybe get guns away from that person or something. So even if this guy wasn't a legitimate threat, he wasn't some Gotham villain about to poison the water supply or start spouting riddles off to Batman, it's still good, and I view it as a very positive thing that the authorities went to investigate, to confirm whether or not this individual had plans to harm himself or others. I'm glad it wasn't a threat that was taken lightly or falling on deaf ears, just because I don't think there's any reason to take that chance anymore when something just like this happened and did lead to a lot of innocent deaths. So I do think this is a good thing, but I have seen a lot of people making the slippery slope argument about, well, if everyone's chats are being policed and you can be arrested for things you say anonymously in a chat room, that could lead to a lot of other things where people are getting punished for really minor offenses. And I can kind of see where that stance is coming from, that perspective, because, for example, E-Rob, who is a Twitch streamer, nay, that's doing him a disservice. He's more than a streamer. He's a goddamn icon. E-Rob made a joke with one of his viewers in his offline Twitch chat about beating him up at TwitchCon. It was just a threat made in jest between two people that knew each other, and E-Rob got reported for it in the offline chat, and Twitch banned him for a whole month because of that threat, even though it was just a joke. And they didn't fall back on the ban. He spent the entire time in the slammer, in purgatory, unable to stream, all because he made that joke that was taken to the principal's office by the hall monitor, and he was unjustly disciplined for it. So I can see why people would then take this situation where this man was arrested after his threats and blow it up to a bigger scale where if this is more commonplace, who's to say authorities won't start just striking people down for really small things without looking at like the bigger context or even bothering to see if they were joking or whatever. Like I do kind of understand where that's coming from, but I still think at the end of the day, it'd be very dangerous and stupid to ignore threats like this guy was making. Multiple threats about mass murder coming soon, killing 20 people, shit like that. He made himself sound like he was just gonna be fucking piling up corpses in the street. Like that is something that I don't think should be taken lightly and shouldn't be ignored. So I am happy they stepped in for that. So I do hope they continue to take threats like this seriously because it could very well prevent a tragedy. This isn't the only time a mass shooter has advertised their upcoming crimes. And while this guy may not have had any plans to do it, some of the other ones have and have followed through on it, and authorities didn't act until it was too late. Now, this does bring me to an extremely important point to mention with this whole subject, and that's the curious case of Josh Palault, whom I've made a video on and who's been on our podcast twice now because his situation was so unique and fascinating and just at times downright diabolical. This shit grabs your nipples and fucking titty twisters them. Like his whole case, his situation and everything is unreal to believe that it actually happened. And it's very similar to what we're talking about right now. Josh, quite a long time ago while playing RuneScape and drinking, made a threat on the game about a school shooting. You know, don't go to school the next day, that kind of thing. And the Jagex, the company behind RuneScape, the developers, got tipped off to what Josh had said, and they forwarded that information to the authorities. So then the authorities scoot in sideways, kick down the door, throw the cuffs on him, and then absolutely steam his fucking ham. He received 6 years in prison. This was not a light sentence by any means. 6 full years, which he served the entire term of, because they determined that they had reason to believe he was like an actual possible threat. And I'm not going to get into like the actual nitty gritty of the case, but with all of the information out there, it feels like it was an extreme case of corruption here that led to him receiving a 6-year punishment. He was a kid who was drinking and saying some stupid, edgy shit online, and it doesn't seem like there was any real evidence to suggest that he was going to go out and hurt people or do anything horrible, that he was just making those shitty, edgy threats. Now, I do think it was right that they stepped in to investigate, just to be sure and just to be safe, but then after they go through the whole song and dance of the investigation, they should have reached the conclusion that this is just an edgy troll. And yes, of course, get slapped with some kind of penalty or charge about making like ridiculous threats online. That's completely fine and understandable. But 6 years because they viewed him like a fucking terrorist made no sense. So I do think with a case like what we were talking about today initially, and comparing it to Josh Palault's case, I do think that there is a level that needs to be had from the authorities where they take these threats seriously, but then they also have to be fair with the investigation, where if they determine it's just some edgy asshole with no real or imminent threat to the people around them, well then charge them for the threats, but don't go the extra mile with this vendetta, this grudge against them where you just want to see them behind bars forever. Now in the case that we're talking about today with the Twitch chatter who made these threats of mass murder, he's currently facing charges of written threats to kill or do bodily harm. Now, that seems to fit the crime. That seems like a punishment that fits the crime. That's exactly what he did. They determined he didn't have any firearms, and they seem confident that he was never actually going to carry out these things. Thus, he's just being charged with the threats of doing these things as opposed to like the potential act of doing them. So I think that overall this whole thing is a good thing from the authorities. It doesn't seem like they're making the same mistake they made with Josh Palault here, where they try and throw the whole book at him, just get the whole kit and caboodle tossed his way. It seems like they know very much what's happening here. They took it seriously, and they're pursuing charges that I think are appropriate for what they've done. Now, I just wanted to talk about this situation because I thought this was a pretty important one. Again, if this was a very unwell individual who was going to carry out something terrible like this, then this would have absolutely just saved lives. And regardless, I think it is still a good precedent to set where you shouldn't be making these kind of stupid, reckless, dangerous threats online in the first place. Like, I do think this charge that he's facing for it is appropriate, and I just wanted to talk about that. That's about it. See ya.